Hello everybody, my name is Gherardo Caracciolo and I'm a Senior Policy Analyst working on the Financial Regulatory Excellence Initiative. The purpose of this video is to share with you the first step of the initiative, the creation of the regulatory database. So before I actually jump into that, let me take a quick step back and remind you what the Financial Regulatory Excellence Initiative is about. This project stems from the observation that over the past couple of decades, the pace of the changes in regulations impacting Canadian financial markets have been constantly increasing. So we all know that regulation is fundamental for an efficient, resilient and well-functioning financial market. But we also know that regulations come with a cost. So for sure a compliance cost, but also if the regulatory framework isn't carefully engineered, an efficiency cost that takes the form of misallocation of resources, mostly misallocation of capital. So what is the goal of our initiative? Well, the goal is to develop a sound, comprehensive and structural analytical tool that will allow to evaluate the Canadian regulatory approach. And through this analysis, what we would like is to assist and help the regulators to develop a modern and efficient regulatory framework. So ultimately, what we would like to do is to really help the regulators to strike the optimal balance in the trade-off between stability and dynamism when designing the regulatory framework. What is the approach that we follow? Well, we follow a two-step approach. The first step is the creation of a database. What we do is to develop a comprehensive database that looks at the regulators and each subsector of the financial industry. Why do we do this? Why do we put the database together? Well, there are three main reasons. The first one is pretty straightforward. We want to create a document in which all the regulations affecting Canadian financial markets are together, so that you can look at it and immediately have an idea of the total amount of rules and regulations that affect the Canadian financial landscape. Second, well, this database will allow an international comparison, because as I said, we are going to have all the different regulators. So the idea is that this database will allow to quickly compare how different regulators within the country deal with similar topics. And third, last but not least, we will have a temporal dimension. So the database will actually feature time series that show how each document, regulatory document, has evolved through time. And these will allow us to understand how the regulator's approach changed over time when dealing with certain topics. So this is the first step. The second one consists in the creation of a scorecard, the regulatory scorecard. In creating these, we will actually apply textual and topic analysis tools in order to really go through the documents published by the regulators, analyze them, and evaluate them against principles that in our mind should guide the regulatory activity. So what I'm going to show you now is step one, the database. So this is the database. It's all going to be online on a website, but this is the form, that's the concept. So for each subsector, you're going to have a table like this. This is for banks, credit unions, loan interest companies, and mortgage brokering. And the table, all the tables will have on the rows all the different type of regulatory documents. So you can see acts, regulation, and rules, and then guidelines, regulatory statements, and advisories. And the columns will be the different regulators. So here we have OSFI, we have Alberta, BC, Ontario, and Quebec. And if you click on all these links, well, you're immediately redirected to the most updated version of the documents that you're looking for. So as I told you, we do also have a time series component in which you can really see the evolution of the regulatory documents. So these graphs represent all the acts listed in the previous table. And how do we read these graphs? Well, the y-axis is our length index that is based on the number of words in each document. On the x-axis, instead, we have time. So these graphs are really showing you basically how the length of each version of these documents evolved and increased over time. Now, pay attention that this doesn't mean anything per se. So this is not saying anything about the quality of the regulation. The quality is something that we're going to explore in step 2. But this just signals that the length of almost every act increased in the past 10 years or so. Apart from a couple, you see that all of them saw their length increasing. So we do this again, and we do it for each subsectors. So you can see that now we have the tables with insurance companies, pensions, and then we have securities and all the other financial services put together. And the tables work exactly in the same way. So on the rows, we do have the regulatory documents, and the columns are the regulators. So if we want to see an example, let's take, for example, securities, and let's take a look at the national instruments that deal with the asset and wealth management. We click on the right link and we are redirected to the page where all these national instruments are listed, and then we can access them. And for all these tables, for all these subsectors, we have the time series component. You can see the graphs, these are all the acts for all the subsectors. And what you can really see is that the pattern is the same that we have seen in the case of the first subsector. So that with very few exceptions, the length of all the acts has increased over time. So once again, let me stress that this doesn't say anything about the quality. This is something that we will investigate in step 2. But again, the length increased. So thank you for watching the video, and I'll share with you new updates very soon.